Shabbat shalom, everybody. It's Rashbi here, Rabbi Shmuel ben Yehoshua, Rabbi Stephen Epstein with this week's 10-minute Torah. So, hope you're all doing well. We are approaching the month of Elul. What that means is that we are starting to think about the high holidays and the days of awe. So, as we start Elul, this is, well, it's kind of serves two purposes. First of all, it's a month lead-in. Okay, it's the month before, 1 month before Tishrei, which the first of which is Rosh Hashanah, which is the spiritual New Year. Now we all know, or maybe we don't, that the Jewish New Year, is in the month of Aviv, and the word Aviv in Hebrew means spring. And yes, it means that the Jewish year starts in March, April, somewhere around there, when Israel left, the house of bondage in Egypt. However, it wasn't until the seventh month, and Tishrei, of course, is the seventh month, when we actually changed the year. So the first of Tishrei, which is going to be about a month, like I said, 4 weeks or so, it will be 5785, the first of Tishrei and Rosh Hashanah. So what makes Elul the beginning of the high holidays is that we start reciting Psalm 27, Psalm for the penitential season. And every morning during the week, when we're doing our shachrit, our morning service, after we blow our shofar. Now, I said there's two things, okay? The first of Elul is also the New Year for animals. Now, we know that Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of the month of Shavat, coming somewhere around February usually, is the New Year for trees. And while all that really was just the date that marks, it's kind of a way of standardizing, how old the trees are. Because remember, when you plant a tree, you have to leave that tree alone for the first 3 years, let it mature, let it blossom, let it flower, let it, give it a chance to mature and produce its fruit. Then in the 4th year, the produce goes to the Levites and the Kohanim, the ministers and the priests. And after that, it's only like a 10% time. Which means if you want to do the 3 years, you want to plant a new tree, you plant it on the 14th of Shavat, because if you plant it on the 16th, you got to wait ultimately 4 years. Okay, so the first of Elul is the new month for animals. Now, remember that with an animal, all right, you have certain criteria as well, like an animal in its first year. How do they designate that? Same way as trees. They use the first of Elul. Now, of course, we can't decide when an animal is born. That's up to the particular animal, but that's kind of the denotation. In modern times, when we don't do sacrifices anymore, and that's really what that was all about, people have kind of turned that around. And it's a way to honor their animals. There are some progressive and liberal synagogues where people come in and they bring their favorite animal, their pets, and they have prayers and stuff. And, I don't know that we do that. I don't know that I want to do that. Have animals scratching our wood floors and stuff. But, some people like to do that. So, okay. We're also coming into Selichot. Selichot is done on the Shabbat prior to Rosh Hashanah. And here's a condition: as long as there are 3 days in between. Otherwise, it's pushed back another month, another week, and you have a week, maybe 8 days, 9 days, or whatever. Okay. And Selichot is when we start doing prayers for forgiveness. We start leading into it. So that's kind of the importance of it. And it's coming on pretty soon. So yes, time flies when you're having fun. Okay. Speaking of having fun, let's talk about this week's Parashat Shoftim, which means officers. So in this particular Parsha, Moses is continuing his discourse, talking about specific commandments that the Israelites are going to need after they conquer and they start settling the land to be able to set up a society. Part of that is the idea of kings. And Moses says, okay, if you want a king, and you probably will want a king to unite people, then that king, first of all, has to be one of you. Okay, no foreign kings. Remember, in Rome, the early emperors were Romans. Afterwards, they would start looking at other peoples, other nations, and kind of import their emperors. Israel, God says, no, it has to be an Israelite. And that king has to have or has to write two Torah. Now, I say have, okay, because they can have the two Torah if there's already one in the library. But whatever the case is, the king has to write his own Torah, right? Years ago, when I was a student, one of my teachers said, you learn through your fingers, right? You write notes, you take notes, and it kind of incorporates in your brain and you're learning it. And not only do they learn when they're writing, but the king is supposed to study that Torah every single day. Quite a difference from what we think of kings today. Kings today and in other societies basically are absolute. They're the absolute rulers. They make the laws. You remember when we talked about in Genesis, when we talked about the word Elohim, which is a generic term for God. And this is in the Portia of Noah. It said there were, the sons of Elohim married the daughters of Adam, of man. And people thought, oh, we now had demigods. No. Elohim is the part of God, not a different God, okay, but a side of God that does justice. Remember, God has the two arms, of course, we're talking figuratively, anthropomorphically, assigning human characteristics to Hashem, because that is the only way we can really understand God in our terms. The right hand is the hand of mercy. The left hand, and that's Adonai. The left hand is the arm of justice, and that's where we get Elohim. So basically, that refers to who was giving out the laws back then? Kings, rulers, right? Judaism is very distinct. A king is the ultimate civil servant. A king serves society, serves his people. And in order for a king to do that, a king must be familiar with all the laws of Torah. That's why the king studies that. So we have also kind of a progression here. Moses talks about the idea that we have kings, we have prophets, and watch out for false prophets, a prophet who tells you to do something different other than what's in Torah. You don't listen to him. In fact, it's very, very severe. You get rid of him, okay? Also, Moses also warns Israel, don't consort or fraternize with other peoples, and be curious about the way they do things and some of their habits and their festivals. Now, today, it's not so much of a big deal, but back then it was a really big difference. If you read the Chumash, the Hertz Chumash that we use in our synagogue, that was compiled and edited by Rabbi Dr. Joseph Hertz, who was the chief rabbi of the British Empire back in the early days of the previous century. He talks about archaeological excavations that have uncovered basically graveyards around sites of altars. In fact, another thing Moses says is you're only going to have one temple, and it will be in a place that God will show you later. No private altars, because when you start having private altars, you start to distort a lot of the laws and rules and the procedures for doing sacrifices and their meaning. You end up with different cults. So we don't do that. That's why today, without a temple, prayers have replaced sacrifices. Just like we talked about Elul, right? We don't sacrifice animals anymore. We have a different regard in modern times, okay? So basically, we don't want our people being lured into some of these practices, because a lot of those ancient nations used to revere these practices that basically worship the body, that gave into bodily lusts and pleasures. We don't do that. We rise above it. We don't ignore it. We don't see it as evil. It's just a necessary part of life. And the idea of Torah is to direct those temptations, those lusts, those desires into appropriate manners. Case in point, this portion also reviews, and this is our triennial cycle. In our triennial cycle for year 2 this year, talks about Kosher, and it reviews the laws of Kosher. Eat this, not that. Why? It's a decree. What makes a cow holy and what makes a pig unholy? Some people say, well, look at what a pig eats. Have you ever seen what a chicken eats? it would put you off of fouls. Okay. But the idea is, number one, you are what you eat, right? What you eat is incorporated into your body. Number two, how much time do we spend dealing with food in our lives, right? We cook, we go shopping, we look and see what we plan our meals. It's a reminder. Think about that. It's a reminder. The same way we put a mezuzah on the top third of our lintel of our door. It's a reminder. The way we wear tzitzis, it's a reminder. So when you're dealing with food that you can eat this and not that, when you're going shopping, you're thinking, okay, I've got these other commandments and mitzvot that I have to, that I need to be reminded of. So think about that today. Think about that. That's one of the reasons why we keep kosher and why we observe Shabbat. And it's good advice for even today. So Shabbat Shalom, we're going to get very, very busy. We have a lot of things coming up. We have an open house at our synagogue. Then we got Salichot. Then we have the high holidays. We're showing Yentl in October during Sukkot. So hope you'll join us. Again, Shabbat Shalom. And as always, thank you for listening.